can I increase my rent of villa because I offer more facilities like pool maintenance, etc.? The short answer is, I guess it depends. Generally speaking, so if we're talking about rental laws, every emirate has its own rental laws. So if we're talking about Dubai, Dubai has what we call a rental, so like a rental cap law, a rent control law. In other words, a law that controls what landlords can do in terms of increasing rent and evicting tenants. So it's, for the lack of a better phrase, a rent control law. So as per this law, which by the way has not changed since I think 2008 or 2009, there are limitations in terms of how much you can increase as a landlord the rent, and when you can evict the tenant. So with regards to eviction, it's not possible. So although the rental contracts have a beginning and an end, as per this rent control law in Dubai, effectively in practice, rental agreements renew from year to year automatically on the same terms and conditions, unless the parties ultimately want to go separate ways or there's a court judgment dictating something else. So which means you cannot just evict the tenant if you don't like what rent they're paying, even at the end of the tenancy contract. So your option would only be to try to increase rent. Now, the rent increase is also subject to a number of regulations, one of which is that you need to notify the tenant 90 days before the expiration of the lease, but that's perhaps a lesser hurdle. And then two, you can only increase rent based on if it's allowed by a RERA calculator. That's based on how much your tenant is paying and what the rental index indicates that sort of the appropriate rent would be for your kind of property. So if you do not fall within this within allowable increase, then you cannot increase rent unless you if that's because the RERA indicator does not show that you can ask for higher rent. You can sometimes, there is a way for you to vary the RERA indicator, and that is by filing a case with RDC, or the Rental Dispute Center, and requesting for the court to appoint ultimately an expert to come and evaluate your property and to determine whether your rent should be higher than what the RERA index shows. So that's really the only way you can show, or you can try to increase rent. But even then, I have to caution you that even then, you don't, let's say if you are right now, you receiving rent of 100,000 dirhams, and then you receive evaluation from the court, through the courts, of 150,000. It doesn't mean that you can increase rent by 50,000. You can only increase rent maximum of 20% maximum. So let's say in this case, if your rent is 100,000 and now the RERA indicator or the court-appointed expert has determined that your rent could be 150,000, you can only really increase to up to 120,000. But again, that's once you've also provided your tenant with the relevant notice, and once you have an actual court decision allowing for you to increase rent.